So, a little bit about me before we start. I have done a ton of work leading strategic analytics and finance projects in higher ed. Um, and during that time, I have uh, recruited and trained and managed happy, high performing teams that were working on my project. And so, a lot of what I'm sharing today, one of the reasons why I went into coaching is because it's one of the more inspiring things that one can do is sort of, as a leader, help people open up. I also am a keynote speaker and I also do consulting. And I put my information at the end, so I'm happy to have you guys call me or talk to me. So um, let's start with a quick check-in. If you've experienced any of these situations, you're not alone and you're in the right place. The colleague who interrupts you mid-sentence, the manager whose feedback feels like it came out of nowhere. A coworker says, sure, no problem, to your request, but consistently forgets or delivers late. These are the everyday conflicts that drain our energy and undermine our effectiveness at work. Here's the good news. Conflict like this doesn't have to derail you. Today, I'm going to share specific techniques, things you can practice and use as soon as tomorrow to navigate these moments with more confidence and better outcomes. We're going to look at what's happening in your brain and your body during conflict, and more importantly, what you can do about it. It's a busy morning. I'm answering emails, juggling 3 projects. The phone rings. It's the controller. I pick it up. Hey, what's up? And she immediately launches in. Why did you ambush Julie? She said you invited her to lunch and then spent the whole time criticizing how she acts in meetings. What were you thinking? She was very scary. My stomach drops. My face gets hot. I can feel my shoulders creeping up towards my ears. My jaw is clenching and my brain goes into overdrive. What? I didn't, wait, what did Julie say? Oh no, how did I screw this up? How do I fix this? She's going to tell everyone. And all of that happens in about 2 seconds. Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn are automatic nervous system responses to perceived threats or trauma, preparing the body to survive through resistance, fight, escape, flight, immobility, or freeze, or appeasement. These are instinctual, not conscious choices, activating when the brain releases stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol, prioritizing survival over your higher order thinking, your logical thought. So who can tell me what's happening in this picture, and feel free to just jump into the notes or into the chat. I probably lost everybody. Okay, well, I'll start. This is a moment in the Star Wars films where this Jedi Master, who's somebody who probably remains calm in every exotic situation, is in the fight of his life. And he's fighting this evil Darth Maul with a horrible lightsaber with 2 sides. And in the middle of it all, a door closes between him and the bad guy. And what does he do? He closes his sword and he sits down and he centers himself, meditating. Now, for those of us who are interested in having Qui-Gon interview us, try the guided meditation. It's really awesome. So, what are some ways you can calm your body and settle your mind when things get stressful? The truth is, in that moment, with the controller, the very first thing I did was take a huge calming breath to get oxygen to my brain and to gather my thoughts. I immediately opened up my tight throat, slowed down my speech, and started to answer her calmly. At the time, I was experimenting with a 3 times a day practice where I followed a mindfulness app that forced me to take deep breaths and focus on one point in the room and clear my mind. There are numerous apps out there that help, some of which, like Calm, are free of charge through your healthcare provider or other avenues, but you don't necessarily need an app. You can try this exercise all on your own. If you can, follow along with me as I demo. What you're going to do is you're going to start with your index finger at the base of your thumb, just the way the arrows go. And when you go up, you breathe. And when you go down, you exhale. So now, this was extremely helpful to me because I'm completely freaking out in my brain about this to get my presentation to work. So take a moment if you do this to notice sort of what you're feeling, how you feel. How are you? Have you changed any changes in your state in your state or your body? So let's try a deep dive on one of the situations. You're presenting your project update. For the third time this month, Jordan cuts you off mid-sentence and starts explaining a better approach. You feel your shoulders tense. Your face gets hot. What happens next? I'll tell you what's next. We're going to breathe. So we're going to take that deep breath. And then what are we going to do? In that 90 seconds, you just bought yourself. You have a choice. In the judger lane on the left, you're running the what's wrong with them story. Your body tightens up, and either you snap back with an edge in your voice. I've done this. We've all have. And what happens? The tension in the room spikes. Jordan gets defensive. You feel worse. Nothing gets solved, and next meeting you're already braced for it to happen again. Well, what happens in the learner lane? First, you catch yourself. Maybe you do the finger breathing. Your shoulders drop. You stay curious instead of furious. What's happening here? What's going on? And then this is the key. Your body language changes. You're not crossed arm defensive. You make eye contact without glaring, which is very hard. And when you speak, your voice is steady, not sharp, not high. It's calm. It's designed to calm the other person down. And when we say what we have to say, we say it without apology and without any kind of waffling. We just simply say, Jordan, I'd like to finish my thought. Then I'm interested in your perspective. Notice the difference? You're setting a boundary, but you're not attacking. You're staying in control of yourself, even though you can't control Jordan's behavior. This is what self-command looks like in real time. And it works because you're not trying to change Jordan or influence his behavior. You're only managing your own response. So let's talk about de-escalation in real time because I went through a lot of items. Reflect on that lion we saw at the beginning. Is it going to help the situation if we become the lion? No, it's just going to be a bigger fight. So let's zoom in for a minute on that body language piece, because this is where most people accidentally escalate things without realizing it. When Jordan interrupts you, your instinct might be to cross your arms. But everyone in that room reads that as defensive or aggressive. You've just signaled, I'm closing off or I'm preparing for battle. Same with leaning back in your chair, staring Jordan down. If you think you're standing your ground, but your colleagues' nervous systems are picking up threat signals. Here's what works better. Keep your hands visible, palms open or resting on the table. Stay in a neutral, grounded posture, not puffed up, not shrinking. Make eye contact with Jordan, but do it softly, like you care. You're looking at them, not glaring through them. And you consciously drop your shoulders. Why does this matter? Because you're sending a different message to everyone's nervous system. I'm not a threat. I'm calm. We can talk about this. And here's the thing. When your body signals safety instead of threat, you actually make it easier for Jordan to hear what you're saying. You've just changed the whole dynamic in the room. Remember, your body speaks first. Before you say a single word, everyone in that meeting reads your body language. Signals safety, not threat. Let's talk about another element. And these two elements together make up a huge percentage, 93% of what you're communicating. So your voice is also important. So imagine saying, it wasn't done, with your voice going up at the end. What does that communicate? Uncertainty, like you're asking permission, or defensiveness, like you're picking a fight. Now try it with a downward inflection. Deep breath. I'd like to finish. That's my talking to my kid's voice. That's grounded. That's calm authority. Same thing with pace. If you rush through with no pauses, actually, I wasn't going to, I wasn't finished yet, blah, blah. You're signaling urgency, maybe even panic. Your colleagues' nervous systems pick up. Something's wrong. This is escalating. But if you slow down and build in pauses, Jordan, I'd like to finish my thought. Then I'm interested in your perspective. You've just done something very remarkable. You've given everyone's nervous system a chance to regulate, including yours. And speaking from your chest rather than your throat, well, that lower pitch is physiologically calming. You're literally helping de-escalate the room. This is why that 93% of communication that's not your words matters so much. Your body and your voice are either escalating or de-escalating every conflict you're in. So now let's talk about words, the 7% of your communication. This is where the yes and technique becomes your best friend. Because the moment you say but, you've just negated everything that came before it. What does the other person hear? They hear, I'm not really listening. I'm just waiting to disagree with you. But yes, and that's additive. I hear you, and I'd like to add this perspective. You've just kept the door open. Here's another powerful move, mirroring. Instead of defending yourself or making about Jordan's behavior, you simply reflect back what you heard. You take Jordan's words and reflect them back to him. Jordan, I'm hearing you say that the timeline is the main concern. Is that right? This does three things. One, it shows you actually listened. Two, it gives Jordan a chance to clarify or correct you. And three, this is the key, it slows everything down. You've just interrupted the escalation cycle. And if things are really heated, try labeling what's happening in the room. I notice we're both talking over each other. Can we slow down? You're not blaming anyone. You're just naming the dynamic. And that simple act of naming often breaks the pattern. These word choices might seem small, But combined with your body language and voice, they can be extremely powerful. So let's just quickly shift to a quick example because this is so common, especially if you're early in your career or new to a role. Your manager says your work isn't what they expected. And here's the thing, you believe you did exactly what they said, what you thought you were supposed to do. So your brain immediately goes to judger lane. What's wrong with my work? Why didn't they explain it better? But watch what happens if you can catch yourself and shift to learner lane. First, you breathe just a few seconds to steady yourself. Then you get curious. Oh, okay. Help me understand. How can I bring this closer to what you were expecting to see? You're not defending, you're not apologizing for work you haven't even understood the critique of yet. Like who knows what he's going to say? You certainly don't in that moment. In fact, if it's me, I always think of something else that I think I screwed up, and that's never useful. So you're just asking for clarity. And then this is crucial, you mirror back what you hear. So you're looking for more detail in the budget impact section. Is that right? This ensures you're on the same page before you respond. That gives you that time to kind of get back into your body and out of defensive mode and think. Finally, you look forward. Okay, that's helpful. I'll make the edits. I'll make sure to clarify any other assumptions before the next project. Is there anything else I should remember as a rule going forward? Same techniques we use for the meeting interrupter, different situation. And instead of leaving that conversation feeling defeated or resentful, you just turned criticism into useful feedback. That's the power of staying in the learning line. Let's take this a step further, and I'll just go through this one really quickly. I don't know if any of you have to deal with what they call the passive aggressive colleague. This is somebody who's just never where they're supposed to be, never giving you what you need at that moment. Because I work a lot with clients who are trying to get someone on their team to be more accountable, more uh, engaged in the timelines and the deliverables and all the other stuff that's going on. So this person will say, sure, no problem when you ask them to do something. And then it doesn't happen, or it's late, or it's incomplete. Your judger lane wants to say, you keep seeing yes when you mean no. Why can't you just be honest? But that's assigning intent. You don't actually know why this is happening. And the moment you make it about their character or motivation, they're going to get defensive. So instead, you observe the behavior. I noticed the last 3 deliverables have come in after the deadline we agreed on. Is everything okay with you? Can we problem solve on what's getting in the way? See the difference? You're naming the pattern. That's factual. And you're staying curious about the cause. Maybe they are overwhelmed. Maybe they don't know how to say no. Maybe there's a resource issue you don't know about. They don't, they're over, they've got too much work on their plate. By staying out of judger lane and just describing what you're seeing, you make it possible to actually solve the problem instead of just venting about it. All right, let's make this concrete. You're going to walk away from this webinar, and within the next few days, one of these situations or another that we can talk about in the Q&A may come up. I can almost guarantee it. So here's my challenge to you. Pick one. Which situation are you most likely to face? The interrupter, the unclear feedback, the passive aggressive colleague, and then pick one technique to focus on. If it's the interrupter, maybe you commit to doing that finger breathing exercise the moment you feel your shoulders tighten. That's it, just that one thing. Or if it's unclear feedback, maybe you practice mirroring. Let me make sure I understand. You're saying X. Is that right? If it's the passive aggressive pattern, you practice observing without judging. I've noticed instead of you always. Don't try to do everything at once. Pick one technique, practice it, master it. And then you'll find the others start coming more naturally. And go ahead and drop in the chat which scenario you're going to focus on this week. I'd love to see what resonates most for this group. Checking the chat. Beautiful. Finger breathing. Yay, Jen. You're going to be the meeting disruptor? Anna? So we've got asking learning questions, mirroring back what we heard. Excellent. Observe behavior without assessing intent or making assumptions, which, as we all know, is a bad idea. All right, everybody. Thank you so much. Okay, here's your toolkit takeaway. And we can use this in our Q&A to try to solve first-time problems. When tension rises, number one, breathe. Don't ever forget to breathe. It's a bad idea. It makes you lightheaded and you're not going to be happy. Center yourself, right? Okay, I've gathered myself. I have my beliefs and my values that are central to me, and I am ready to talk. Keep checking the judger versus the learner. Am I on the right path? And I've got a little drawing in the back of the presentation that it's like a graphical representation of the learner path and the judger path. And in the judger path, you just end up in something called the judger pit, which looks like a bunch of mud. And on the learner path, everything gets lovely and you go off into the trees. Signal safety, especially if you're in a position of power. I mean, this is something I did a lot with my teams where it was just like, I'm going to be calm and I'm going to use my body in a way that doesn't threaten other people. And then finally, and this is really the big one, it's just stay curious. What else might be true? And there's interesting kind of ways you can do that by just remapping thoughts. I think they're an idiot. What else might be true? They've made a mistake. They're a human being. And that really helps. And so what's not here? Again, changing the other person. You can't control their response. You can only control how you show up. And that is actually incredibly empowering because it gives you permission to let go of anxiety related to their response. You are in control and you are being calm and signaling to everybody else in the room that you're the reasonable one. So before we start our Q&A, I want to leave you with 4 universal principles that should guide all of this work. And they come from an anthropologist named Angelise Arian, and she studied Native populations. She studied all over the world, and she came up with these 4 universal communication principles. Show up and choose to be present. And in a world where everybody has their cell phone and everybody's doing side talking, etc., be present. Give the gift of your attention to everyone in the room and to whoever's talking. Pay attention to what has heart and meaning. What do we mean by that? Well, if you can tell that their intention was good, even though it didn't go the way that you thought it should, pay attention to that. That's the most important part, that they're trying to do better, etc. And this is the hugest one, and this gets back to the body and the voice. Tell the truth without blame or judgment. That's that mirroring. That's that I see this happening. Am I right? Am I correct? And then finally, this is the really about you can't control the situation. You can only figure out what's going on in that present moment, right? Be open to outcome, not attached to outcome, because sometimes in our brains, we've already played out a conversation that we're going to have with somebody, and we think we're going to be able to influence them to do something by some action of our own. And somehow you have to kind of move together and kind of get into this relationship with them such that you both go someplace neither one of you maybe thought you were going to go, because you learned something new from the exchange. All right, so I wanted to give us a lot of time to have some questions and have some scenarios, because I only had time for 3. And I know that there are very many. And in my long career, I have probably experienced anything uh, that you can imagine. So I'd love to invite you all to ask any questions you may have in the Q&A part. And also feel free to share any work scenarios that you'd like to work through as a group, or just to share, just to have me interesting.
I see a question from
I
Margaret.
do.
Can you describe all these steps as they happened in your conversation with that phone call or accusation scenario that you started?
Sure. So the first thing is that there are certain people that you work with where you're like, I'm going to have to prepare myself for this conversation. And so this was somebody that I was working with where I was like, how can I de-escalate? Because every time this person calls me, she's yelling and she's flamed up about something, right? And so what I had been practicing was this sort of centeredness, this breathing technique. And so what happened is, as soon as I heard her voice, which of course came through yelling, I had trained myself to go and get my center back. Because at the time I was like, oh my God, I'm being buffeted by all these winds. I have no idea what she's talking about. And so then I started mirroring what she was saying. Tell me, tell me more. Like how I can tell you my intention in having that conversation, but you've heard somebody else's perspective. So tell me more. Tell me more about what she said and how she perceived it. And then, of course, I use the power of the unequivocal apology. I'm so sorry if she didn't, that there was a mix up here. How can I make it better? And so, and I kept her talking, which was the other thing. I was like, here. So she eventually listened to my explanation, which was, you know, this particular individual, we were trying to work out a problem, and she would become fairly aggressive in a meeting. And so my colleague and I were just, thought we'd have her out, we'd give her lunch, and then we would try to talk through what we were experiencing in the room and what people were telling us about that behavior. And it was done, I think, with a good deal of love and caring. However, it was, this was an, I mean, this woman worked full time for that controller, so she was not really, I think she was already on edge most of the time anyway. Um, but in the end, you know, the controller sort of took a breath and started to calm down and sort of understood what we were saying.
Thank you, Kathy. A question from Nima. If someone is taking advantage of your kindness, how should you address that without conflict?
Hmm. So this is perhaps someone who has, I just want to, I'm going to mirror for a second so we all know, but so this is somebody who um, has gone beyond one of your boundaries, let's say. And in theory, you're aware of what that boundary is. Like, when it has pushed from I'm giving you a gift to a resentment. And so, wherever that line is, I think it's really good to just, use that non threatening body language, use that non threatening voice, and use that curiosity to kind of talk to them about how you're, what they're, how you're observing their actions. I saw that this happened. Did you know that I actually spent 10 hours on that? And so when I heard that, um, it it kind of felt demoralizing to me. And hopefully uh, they're open to that. But I mean, telling the truth without blame or judgment is not easy. But paying attention to what has heart and meaning and noticing something um, that they not may not be aware of is sometimes the only way to kind of get there.
Thank you, Kathy. What additional level of responsibilities do managers have if they want to work within this framework?
I think the critical thing, and I was a manager for a very long time, and I think the biggest thing for me is not making assumptions. So I would see a behavior over and over again, and I would just name it. So I'm seeing this happen. That's where you get is everything okay? This isn't like you. This is not, because everybody knows who their best self is. And sometimes with something going on that day, what's happening? And so, I once had an employee who was not delivering at all. And he was doing things like in a way that weren't complete, that caused more problems down the road. And he was taking a really long time to get these things done. And so I had him into the office and I said, in this case, I had reviewed his history and noticed that he was significantly underpaid compared to other ones. And I thought, oh, well, let's explore what's going on for him. And I I actually said to him, I am noticing that you're paid a lot less than others. How does that, is that at all impacting what's happening for you at work? What, how can we, how can we make you happier? Um, and then sort of it came out that he felt disrespected and he felt overly corrected by other people. And so it just had he frankly had a little tendency towards depression. And so those negative messages had increased in volume in his head, and he was sort of ignoring the positive messages. So I really just sat with him and said, I think you're fantastic at these things. And yes, and this may be holding you back. Like, how can we move you forward in a way that makes you effective and happy and moves you into the next level of your career?
Thank you, Kathy. Another question from the audience. I understand you said that we cannot change people. Can you talk more about changing someone else's mindset when you're trying to get them to understand where you're coming from and meet you in the middle in terms of effort?
Interesting. So in this case, um, this colleague, let's pretend it's somebody, it could be a parent or something. Um, is I'm not sure what mindset means, but I guess that they have an addiction to a strongly held belief that maybe is conflicting with something that is your strongly held belief, because those can be really tough. And I think what you're trying to do is get really curious about their mindset, and not in a, you really have to seek to understand where they're coming from. So sometimes, you know, you can talk to people about, what was a moment where something was really going through your mind and um, you couldn't express it, or tell me more. You just keep saying, tell me more. Okay, so what you're saying is that everybody's an idiot. Okay, is that true? And what about, if you know them, you could say, well, but I also saw this happen. And what that seems to contradict what you're saying. Help me out here. It's really about opening up the dialogue through this openness, this curiosity about, there's something you can look up. It's called empathy maps, and it's a it's a technique that they use in sort of change management for a particular population that is going through a major change. So you think, what are they seeing? What have they heard in the past? What is their perspective? And you get really educated on it. And then you think about the impact that something you're saying is actually having on that. And you just choose to put yourself in their shoes for a minute. Does that help?
Thank you, Kathy. Um, those are the questions I've seen so far. Thank you for answering the questions. I believe you have more to share or slides to share.
I do, just a few. All right, so this one's just thank you, and thank you for your feedback and your questions, because every time I do one of these, I learn something new. In this case, God bless you, you all helped me learn Canva and presenting with Canva in Zoom, which I was unable to think about why it wasn't working. Okay, so here's how to get in touch with me. And I obviously I'm a coach and I charge for my coaching services, but I also offer 30 minutes of free coaching as a way of sort of helping people understand what they're looking for and how coaching can help or not help. I also have a website called Whimsy at Work, and I will I have a goofy thing called the Garden of Delights where it's just pictures that make people happy. So if you have one, send it along and I'll put it up there. Um, and then you can find me on LinkedIn with that link. And so I put in this next slide, this concept of positive intelligence and this concept of building mindfulness into your practice so that you stay in the present and out of the mind spin and out of the regret spin that happens from the past. The Cognitive Bias Codex is really, really interesting because it talks about like every bias that could ever be has ever been mapped, and there's like 188 of them, and they're hilarious because there's some that are the opposite. You're like, oh, well, I could do this or I could do that. And so it's really helpful to examine your own biases and your own automatic thinking, and to know that your brain is working very hard and it has a tendency to simplify things. It has a tendency to fill in the blanks. In conversations or other things that you're experiencing, and so like the you'll remember things incorrectly is what I'm saying. So that's a really helpful one because sometimes by examining those biases you can actually see um, how you might leverage a bias to encourage different behavior in others or yourself, which is the most important thing. Be aware of your own biases for sure, because that they're crucial. I mean, I've worked a long time, and a lot of the big ones that I think of are sort of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where somebody knows very little about something, and then they assume a huge thing, and they're totally wrong. And it's very hard for them to let go of that core belief. So checking that in ourselves is something else that's really helpful. The last thing is the ladder. No, it's not the last thing, but this ladder of inference, this idea that there is a reality that could be viewed by a video that is the actual things that happened. But then your brain adds its biases, its selective memory, it's all these other things, and you work, and maybe it's some experience or a trigger that happens, and you're working up this ladder of assumptions until you take action. And a lot of times we take action on something that is fairly benign, but we misheard a word like Emily Latella in the old Saturday Night Live things, and then we just go off, right? And then it's like, oh, well, that was not exactly what you said, was it? And then finally, there's this, this cartoon diagram about change your questions, change your life. It's something that I had on my door when I was working at Cal, um, to remind me to make the good choices and not end up in, like, I still have a visual memory of wallowing in the judger pit in the mud and being stuck there and not being able to sort of invoke my creativity and my questioning so that I could find a solution. And then the next piece is really the appendix. I see we have another question.
We have another question from Judy. If one says yes and versus yes but, the former implies that you actually agree with the other person, whereas the latter means that you actually disagree. So how do you present yourself?
That is so funny. I mean, it's not funny, right? So yes, and there's a like a extra technique that you can use with yes and, which says that you find the one kernel of something that you can agree with in their otherwise, crazy idea. Well, I won't judge it, but anyway, something that you're not understanding, but you say, I really like whatever that thing was. Maybe it was like, I really like how you dotted your I's and crossed your T's. You've been very thorough. And I'm just wondering about this. So it's really about kind of, you're not signaling that you agree, but you're signaling one thing that can open up the conversation and help them, you know, get down, move downwards and calm down and not feel defensive.
Thank you, Kathy. I don't see other questions in the chat or Q&A. Do you have a few more slides to share?
I don't, well, I mean,
Oh,
I
is that
can walk
it?
through the appendix.
We have 3 more minutes.
Okay, so we've got the Cognitive Bias Codex. We think we know what other people are thinking. This is a bias we have. We fill in the blanks, we rush choices. We recall stories differently. So check this out. It's out on Wikipedia, and it is so fascinating because each one of these little things are like, oh, that's fascinating. Um, this is the judger pit. Here we are down in the judger pit. Why am I such a failure? Why are they? Why bother? What's wrong with me? What's wrong with them? Versus what are my choices? What decisions can I make? What actions can I take? And how can I learn more? Which is a really strong uh, sort of way of thinking about your choices in that 90 seconds after you have a strong reaction to something. Here's the ladder of inference. We select data, we make interpretations of that data, we draw conclusions, and we take action. And all of that is influenced by our context, our beliefs, and our values. And so we have to kind of, in a situation where we've gone up the ladder of inference, we need to back down and take ourselves back to the what actually happened and what was actually said, which of course is quite interesting now that we have recordings of meetings. And then I've got a couple of slides in here with sort of body language. I am not a threat. Voices, this is how you de-escalate voice, lower pitch without going flat. And then short-circuiting conflict with your words. And this last one I love on number 4 is silence. You can use silence as a way to slow things down. And sometimes in that moment of silence, people will kind of come back to themselves or get real interested in what you're thinking.
Thank you, Kathy. I see one question from
Oh, good.
Sylvia. How do you solve problem caused by office politics?
So office politics are related to people's beliefs and their values and how comfortable they feel with someone else, based on whatever their history of experience was. I mean, everybody, at some point, um, I had a Latin teacher in high school named Joanne, and forever after, you know, anytime I see somebody with that kind of energy, that, like, translated this wrong, um, it triggers me. So I think really understanding kind of, wow, I had a really powerful response to that. What was that about? Which is something you can think about while you're doing mindful breathing, is how I would deal with that.
Thank you, Kathy. The time now is 3 o'clock. I want to take this opportunity to thank you, Kathy, for that insightful and engaging presentation. You have provided us with practical tools and strategy to navigate difficult conversation and transform conflict into collaboration. We truly, truly appreciate your time and valuable perspectives. And to everyone
Thank
in the
you.
audience, thank you for your attention and participation today. It's very clear that you are committed to improving communications and building stronger workplace relationships. And let us all put what we've learned today into practice. And remember that every conversation is an opportunity to grow and collaborate. We'll be sending out a short survey along with today's presentation recording. Your feedback is very important to us, so please take a moment to fill out the feedback so that we can improve future sessions. Thank you once again for being here today. Wishing you all a wonderful rest of your day. Bye bye now.
Bye.